Welcome everybody! Ciao, ciao, benvenuti, ciao! So, it's a great pleasure to see you all here tonight for this really special night with a really special guest. So before we start, first of all, my name is Alessandro Mora. I'm gonna be the co-host of this evening together with Roberta Liguori. Ciao Roby, hello Roberta.
Hi, I'm here. Hi everyone, it's a great pleasure to see all of you.
So welcome everybody, okay? Make sure your audio is muted. So on the left corner on down, just make sure it's muted and your camera on, because actually we can see you and we can see your face here in front of us. So it's gonna be excited and it's gonna be exciting actually. And so we are ready to start. That's all from me. So let's rock and roll. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Richard Bandler. Hello, Richard. You can unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, we can hear you. Hello, Richard. First of all, thank you so much for being here with us. It's a great pleasure, great honor. And I think it's going to be a great session, great evening. So we have a lot of interesting questions for you, especially based on your last book. But before going there, and since there are a good amount of newbies, I'd like to start by asking you to give us a brief description of NLP, brief definition of NLP.
Neurolinguistic programming itself was founded out of the idea that it was something that made more sense to figure out what people did successfully and re-educate others to do it, rather than to figure out what went wrong with people and try to understand it. In a nutshell, we developed, John Grinder and myself, back in the 1970s, a model called the meta model, which is a linguistic model that was a map of the brain and how people spoke language intuitively, not grammatically. Grammarians don't talk about natural language, linguists do. No matter where you're born on the face of the earth, you intuitively learn a language and you intuitively understand whether or not it's a well-formed sentence or not. So it's kind of like a map of the unconscious. Noam Chomsky developed this. And we took the same model and applied it and built a tool that was basically a problem-solving tool. And in my book, Problem Solving, I actually go through and explain that we did something more than we thought we were trying. We thought we were modeling successful therapy, but we were actually modeling successful problem solving. And we've used that tool to develop all kinds of ways of being able to represent what people do consciously and unconsciously in their thinking that makes them more skilled at things. I work with professional athletes. I work with business people. I've worked with every kind of patient that was given up on by everybody.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, basically, we found ways of modeling success so that if somebody got over a phobia, we could model how they did it and teach other people how to do it as well.
Yes, yes, that's great. So I have here in my hands actually your most recent book, okay, Legacy of the Master. And personally, I think it's really a great book because basically you explain how you think when you work with clients. And in the first chapter, you talk about the rules of thumb. And I would like to, for you to give us the idea and which are your rules of thumb when you work with clients?
Well, actually, I have quite a few, but to start with, rule of thumb is an idiom in English. It may not translate that well, but it's basically the basic ideas I use to guide my behavior. I have 54 years of seeing clients, and most of which had been given up on by everybody. And the reason I was so successful with them is I never looked at it as a pathology. I always tried to understand how it worked, because if one mind can do something, another mind could do the same thing. So even when people had, quote, symptomatic behavior, as a rule of thumb, I tried to learn how to do it from them as if it was a skill. And see, you can either go into the past and make sense out of why somebody has a problem, or you can think of the problem as a successful learning that's not particularly productive and try to learn how it works so that you know where to change it. Because the second rule of thumb is to make a decision about whether or not people have a map in their mind which does some things and doesn't do others. And if that map has something in it that's where it's represented in the map, but it's not productive, you go about it differently than if it's just something for which they have no map whatsoever. You know, so if people don't know how to spell, and, you know, I worked a lot with learning disabled children, and they had no map about how to spell. They had been taught to spell phonetically, which can't even be spelled phonetically in English. It might be in other languages. I noticed in Ireland that a phone book started with an F, and a phone booth said F-O-N, and in America it's a P-H. I have no idea where the hell that came from, but it's not phonetic. English isn't a phonetic language. You have to be able to make pictures of words and encode them so that you can pull them back up. And when we taught kids to do that, that were supposed to be pathologically learning disabled, they were able to. And it wasn't that they were mapping the territory wrong. They just weren't mapping it at all. You go to school and most people are never taught anything about memorizing, but yet they're expected to do it for years. Just one of those things. With me, with clients, one of my rules of thumb is to be able to do what they're doing. And the other one is to be able to figure out whether or not I have to build something new or go in and reorient something that's already there. Some people motivate themselves with one thing, but they can't motivate themselves with something else. They got a good motivation strategy, but it doesn't work for everything. So they may need a new strategy. My rule of thumb is to try to understand what's being mapped, what's not being mapped, and what's being mapped incorrectly. And if I can understand that, then knowing what to do next is a lot easier.
Absolutely. And you worked a lot in the learning system. So in the school, I remember you talking about, you know, finding people that actually know how to do something and then understand how they do it and teach it to the different persons, different people.
Yeah, a lot of times we have people teaching things that can't even do them, which is odd enough. In America, in the textbooks, you know, even for the first, second, third, and fourth grade, they put the answers in the teacher's book, but not in the student's book. So they have all these problems, but they make sure the teacher isn't going to get the wrong answer because they have no faith that the teacher knows how to do it in the first place. And some do and some don't. And it, you know, if you don't know how to do something, teaching other people how to think about it is very difficult. So when we wanted to teach spelling, we went out and found people who won spelling bees and found out how they were thinking. When I was hired by a baseball team to improve the batting average of people, I took the guy who had the highest batting average and found out how he thought about hitting the ball, how he prepared for it, what he practiced and rehearsed in his mind, and taught people to do the same kind of thing that he did. And it increased their batting average overall across the team. Because if you change the way people think, it changes how they feel and therefore changes what they're capable of doing. And that's the real foundation of all NLP, is to know how to change how somebody thinks. And the best way to go about that is to find people who are successful at something and repeat it. We have seemed to have lost the signal.
No, we're good. We're good.
Oh, okay, because I'm frozen on the screen. There's nothing worse than seeing yourself frozen.
No, we can hear you and we can see you actually perfectly.
Okay, well, that's good. I'll just ignore the screen. I don't really like looking at myself while I talk anyway. I'm usually not in the audience.
You're right. Otherwise, it would be a problem. That's very interesting because actually NLP, you gave a definition of NLP by it's like, first of all, an attitude. And that's one of the most important things. So by the way, this is a very interesting part because as Richard was telling, NLP, first of all, it's an attitude. It's an attitude of, you know, we don't want to fix things, but actually people have in their brain machines that actually work, but they work in a wrong direction many times. So people, for example, that suffer of post-traumatic stress disorder, and they can relieve a particular trauma or something like that, actually, they have a great machine to, you know, stay and go in and get back to that memory. So the machine is perfect to get the memory back. But instead of relieving a traumatic or stress situation, you can aim it in another direction so that actually you can enjoy, for example, beautiful moment of the past instead of the worst one. And this, I think, is one of the best gift that working with Richard for a lot of years, I understood and I learned. And it's watching and seeing the people in front of me as not broken, but actually they can do something, they can really do something, but it's just aimed in a wrong direction. And so my work is taking maybe that particular strategy because it works many times, and then turn it and aim it in a different direction so that where actually people can do something different. Let me know if Robbie, let's get back.
Yeah, it's my turn. It's my turn.
It's your turn.
It's my turn. So I got a question coming from the fact that in the last few years, many more people struggle every day with the stress and anxiety. So how do you deal with anxiety, uncertainty, and the fear of the future?
Well, I mean, it's the same way you deal with everything. If you think a certain way, it produces stress. Most of the time, people have pictures that are way too big, whether they're constructed horrible things that might happen or memories of bad things that did happen. If you have big, horrible pictures in your head, they're going to make you feel bad. And if they're too close, they're going to make you feel worse. So I have a tendency, whatever it is people think about, to put a border around it, shrink it down to the size of a postage stamp, and blink it black and white for a while. Because neurologically, what happens is people go into loops, it spins around until it habituates, and then a few minutes later, they make the same pictures and do the same things, so that they have, you know, the endless ability to feel stress about a whole wide variety of things. But what they don't practice doing is stopping it. And this will stop it like that. I use it with all kinds of stuff. And I'm talking about people that have very traumatic pasts, you know, Holocaust victims, horrible things. And I imagine all these new wars are going to bring on a whole new level of this. You know, in this country, there are so many veterans that are homeless and suffering from post-traumatic stress. It's ridiculous, especially when the technology exists to do something about it. It's just not widespread enough. So that's why I'm talking to all you people. You got to get out there and get people to relax a little bit. This world is just way too tense, and people are way too upset about all kinds of silly things that they don't need to be.
Yeah, sure. And again, when you change the way you think, you change the way you feel, therefore you can change everything you can do. I love this. And other question for you, Richard, hypnosis. Let's talk about hypnosis. Hypnosis has a big role in your work with clients. So,
well, hypnosis is a fancy word for really sophisticated concentration. If you concentrate in the right way, it stabilizes your brainwave patterns. And there are as many states of hypnosis and meditation as you could possibly imagine. The brain, you know, is an incredibly marvelous device where you have billions and billions and billions of neurons, each talking to 10 to 100 others. And numerically, there are as many neurons in your brain as there are stars in the sky. And there are actually, that at least that we know of right now, 11 levels of this going on simultaneously. So the number of things that we could think, the possibility for the brain is limitless as the universe itself. And most people don't take advantage of that. They learn a pattern in their brain and they just keep running it and running it and running it. Some of those are good and some of those are not so good.
Sure. So if I ask you which is the most effective technique you use with your client, with hypnosis, what would you say?
Well, I use hypnosis to line up conscious and unconscious programming, because there's always going to be unconscious programming and it needs to go in the same direction as your conscious desires, which means sometimes I change the conscious desires and sometimes I change the unconscious programming and sometimes both, so that at least they're all headed in the same direction. The conscious mind is like a flashlight in a dark room, and it only shines on what it's shining on. And that doesn't mean that the room isn't full of other things. And if you don't look where you're going, you're going to trip over something. There's a reason why in a car, the rear view mirror is smaller than the windshield. And that's because you should spend a lot less time looking at where you've been and a lot more time looking at where you're going.
Yeah, it's a smart decision. Ale.
Yes. I read some questions in the chat, Richard, and first one, I think one is great because it's from two 10-year-old boy, and they ask, how can we be more happy? And I know you have a particular idea of the happy thing, about happiness and things.
Well, how can we be more happy? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. Well, to begin with, most people think of happiness as a place you go or arrive at, rather than it's actually not even a verb, it's an adverb. One happily does this or happily does that. And if you're going to spend more of your day happily doing things, then you need to have some good planning. You need to be able to see yourself being more cheerful, because whether you're cheerful and happy is a decision. It's not a result. You don't end up suddenly being happy. People keep waiting for the outside world to make them happy. And you can happily watch television. You can happily jog. You can happily lift weights. You can happily look at a flower. You can happily smile at your children. You can happily do anything, but you need to decide to do it that way and practice it, because it's a skill. People, when I wrote the book, The Secrets of Being Happy, the big secret is that you need to have friends, a purpose, and you need to do it on purpose, that you need to deliberately decide, I'm going to spend this amount of time doing this and I'm going to do it happily, as opposed to taking a deep breath, sighing and going, oh, I have to wash the dishes. There's no reason why you can't do it cheerfully. No reason under the immense vastness of this universe. If you want your dishes clean, you might as cheerfully do it. If you're going to walk to work, then you might as well cheerfully do it. And there's no reason not to. And people keep waiting for the outside to make them happy rather than being happy and enjoying and having gratitude. Good Lord, we have the whole universe to live in. Since the beginning of time, 13 billion years it took to get to the point where this planet was livable, and we evolved on it. And now we're looking at the stars, figuring out how to go there. We're not in the universe. We're not separate from the universe. We're part of the whole evolutionary process since the beginning of time. And that should make us feel important. That should make us feel like there's something more important to do than beat each other up, rob each other, and fight endless wars about nonsense. We should make our life important instead of trying to tell everybody else how to live. And the best way to do that is to happily do the things you have to do. And the more cheerful you are, the more cheerful people around you will be. It seems to be contagious.
That's great. Absolutely. There are a lot of questions here in the chat for you, Richard. And there are a lot with health, about health. And basically, some people ask, for example, if we can heal from fibromyalgia, or we can, you know,
You can
improve
heal what? I'm sorry, I didn't understand the word.
fibromyalgia.
I don't know what that means.
Probably I don't pronounce it well. It's
That could be, or I don't know the word. That's the other possibility. Did
so
you say fibromyalgia, or did you
Yes.
say?
correct?
Oh,
Correct.
yeah. Well, you didn't pronounce it properly, but that doesn't matter. I guessed. I'm a good guesser.
And yeah,
The truth is, we have no idea the limits of our own healing. And fibromyalgia is where you got too many neurons firing too often about too many things. And that's why people feel pain all over the place. And learning to control your neurology, hypnosis is one of the best ways to go about that. That's why I've used it for so long. You can get people into deep states of relaxation, and you can control their pain, their blood pressure, their heart rate, all kinds of things. You know, it's not going to shoot plaque outside of your arteries, but it is going to make your blood pressure more controllable. And if you can learn to relax muscles and turn signals off and turn them on, I try to hypnotize people with fibromyalgia and get one arm to be full of it and the other one not, and then reverse them so that their brain can learn, because everything needs an on-off button. And when you have chaotic brain signals firing off, they can look at these on MRIs and see it going on in the brain. And the fact that they can see it there doesn't mean that it can't be stopped. It means it probably can, because we can control our brainwave patterns. People have been doing it with meditation and hypnosis for centuries and centuries and centuries. Becoming a highly skilled hypnotist is always going to make everything easier for you, whether you're working medically or you're working on yourself or you're working with patients, especially people, you know, I get a lot of people to come in that have, quote, psychological difficulties, or they're striving for greater success. And whether they're trying to optimize themselves or repair something, I still look at it all as re-education. It's all about re-education. You re-educate the way somebody thinks, how they have control over their states of consciousness, and you'll do better.
absolutely. There are, you talk about hypnosis, and many people still think, which I know, still think that hypnosis, you know, from the movies, you swing.
Yeah, the Sven Valley movies started this centuries ago. That's why Milton was so reticent to teach anybody that wasn't a doctor or a dentist or a psychologist. And he actually didn't want to talk to us, but we didn't really give him a choice.
You went there. Relentless, relentless, relentless.
Yes, I'm incredibly relentless. And, you know, I mean, the very first thing he asked us to do when we walked in the door was to write down all of our credentials, you know, in this little book. And I opened the book and it was Dr. So-and-so, graduate in, you know, psychiatry, that, you know, from the University of this. And I read all those things down, and I wrote California driver's license, 1962, you know, and I wrote down every credential I'd ever gotten for anything. I had a fishing license. I had all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
I
actually,
didn't think that was funny, by the way. He got very grumpy after that.
yeah, you have actually the great privilege to work with Milton Erickson and learn from him how he was doing hypnosis. But then you went ahead and you did a different thing, or you completed his work.
Well, understand that most of the people doing any kind of hypnosis or psychotherapy or psychiatry at the time had certain rules. They had rules that they gotten from Sigmund Freud, that, you know, you were supposed to look for what caused problems and then understand what caused problems, and then miraculously the problem was supposed to disappear. They also had this thing that you were supposed to do everything unconsciously, you know, what they call intuitively. But intuitions have rules, they're rule-governed behavior, and they can be learned. And we knew this because we were scientists, and, you know, Grinder was a linguist, you know, I was a mathematician, and we understand that these are learnable skills, that people aren't born knowing algebra. You know, there's not an algebra gene any more than there's a music gene. and that, you know, that you learn things, you practice them, and you acquire skill. And if you have the right strategies, you'll do well. If you apply yourself relentlessly, you'll do even better. And with hypnosis and with all things that have been learned since the beginning of time, hopefully the people that learn take them further than the people that taught them. That's called progress. And by modeling what he was doing unconsciously and teaching people to do it on purpose and to learn those skills on purpose, we've been able to create a generation of hypnotists, actually several generations. In my case, I think the third. I've had grandchildren come and get prac courses and tell me their grandfather went to my prac courses. You know, some things about being around a long time, you know. I had somebody come up and show me a picture of them when they were like 5 sitting on my knee and going, you know, my grandfather came and then my father brought me and now I'm back. And I'm going, good, multi-generations. But by teaching more people to be able to use hypnosis as a skill, then more problems get solved and more wonderful things happen. When I get a major league athlete or a class A athlete who comes to me and he's gone into a slump, I don't just try to bring him out of the slump. I try him to do better than he's ever done before in his entire life. I raised the bar. It's, you know, they always come to me and go, can you get me out of my slump? And I'm going, you know, I said, why would you want to get out of your slump? Wouldn't you want to go around it and instead of drag yourself by the bootstraps slowly out of a slump, wouldn't you rather start off in a whole new place where you're better than you ever were? And I remember telling a pitcher one time, and a major league pitcher, I said, now I want you to see yourself throwing a better pitch than you've ever thrown in your entire life. Something new, something different, something, you know, outstanding, you know, and see yourself do it repeatedly. And, you know, and he looked at me shocked and said, nobody's ever asked me to do that. And I said, well, everything comes from imagination. You know, people didn't start out throwing curveballs. You know, that somebody had to learn to do it and then teach other people to do it. That's how progress comes along. I took the skills I got from Milton and used them as the foundation to be able to teach myself greater skill and also to teach others. Because when you build a calculus the way we do of somebody's unconscious behavior, you're able to compute things that they would have done had they stumbled across them or lived to be 300.
Absolutely. And I loved the way you use hypnosis because many people fear hypnosis, are afraid because they think actually you give control to somebody else, but actually it's the opposite. You gain control of yourself. And I think
people, when they're hypnotized, can do things that they can't do normally. They get access because, so to speak, they step out of their own way. That, to me, you know, hypnosis is a reciprocal process by which I try to build a feed-forward loop between myself and the person, not a feedback loop. I don't want to tell them where they've been. I want to give them a target of where they want to go. And sometimes I do it by showing them. And sometimes I do it by explaining to them what they can do in their mind to change ideas and understandings and build new targets so that they can line up their unconscious desires and programming with their conscious desires and their conscious beliefs so that everything's headed in the same direction without disruption, and people can surprise themselves. And it happens all the time in my work. In every kind of field you could think of. Neurolinguistic programming is unique in that it's metadisciplinary. It's about other fields. We can help a baseball player to do well, a race car driver to do well, and a physicist to do well, and an engineer to do better, you know, anybody because everybody has a brain and everybody is using it, and it works for some things and not for others. And when you can tell the difference between those things, then you can help people to exceed their own expectations. And there's nothing better than surprising yourself.
Absolutely. There are you just mentioned it, but there were many questions about belief and how to change belief, or if belief
let's put it this way. It's about believing. It's not a belief. A belief
That's
is a thing. That's a noun. And believing is something you engage in. And everybody has their own way of believing things. And some of what they believe is very useful and some of it isn't. Everybody believes the sun's coming up tomorrow, whether they say it out loud or not, or they wouldn't be planning ahead. You know, that would be ridiculous. I remember a Buddhist telling me one time, you know, that he had given up all of his beliefs and his ego. And then 2 minutes later, he told me that he had to leave because he had to go to a monastery because meditation was at 3 o'clock. And I'm going, well, if you didn't believe that was true, then you wouldn't be thinking about it or going there or planning. You know, that, you know, sometimes, you know, the application of beliefs, that somebody comes up with a good idea and then people begin distorting it into nonsense, you know, and, you know, that's true about everything. You can't even believe some of the things I've heard about NLP and myself, let alone that, you know, that are just nonsense. You know, that, you know, if you get people to repeatedly look in a certain same direction, they'll get smarter, you know, and, you know, that's not what I-axis tells you what people are doing. It doesn't mean that if you do it more often, you get smarter. You get smarter by changing the way you think about certain things, by making some things bigger, some things closer, some things about the future, seeing yourself in some things and not others. And the way in which you organize the possibilities of thought controls how well you're going to function.
Yeah, definitely yes. Some people is asking how we can, with NLP skills, how we can make it so that we can create a long-term result instead of getting back to the old habit. So somebody says, you know, sometimes you get back to old habits. How can you actually make it that stays, the change can stay? Because when you work with people, actually they change and the change stays. How can you do that? How do you do that?
Well, I always do that.
Yeah.
I don't change anything so it could go back. And
That's
I
right.
make sure, believe me, I try to put it back. You know, you know, I'll even tell people how to put it back if they want to.
Yeah, I saw that.
That the idea is that, you know, the reason people go back to bad behaviors is that they haven't made what they've changed more important than what they were doing in the past, in a nutshell. And this is done with the size of images and especially seeing yourself in the future succeeding and desiring it more than whatever your bad habit is, smoking, drugs, you know, all kind of stupid ass thing, worrying. You know, when I work with people, one of the first things I always ask them about is how you spend the currency of living. The currency of living is how you spend your time. In English, people go, how did you spend your day yesterday? You know, have you got a few minutes to spare, like they're coins? And, you know, there are lots of idioms in English that have this kind of talk about it. But the currency is how you spend your moments. And if you spend 3 minutes here and 2 minutes there and 5 minutes there worrying about something, it adds up. When you start to calculating it out to where it's 30 minutes or an hour a day, good God, it's 365 hours in a year, 3,010 years, in 4 years, it's 15,000 hours, you know, and that's your plan for the future. If you're going to keep reliving bad memories and, you know, and worrying about things that you can't do anything about. You know, I mean, you know, I hear there are people out protesting in the streets in America, you know, bugging politicians about things that they have absolutely no control over, you know, and, you know, and there, you can see how distraught they are. They're distraught about things that they really don't even understand. You know, my favorite one is when somebody came up and said to somebody, they go, that they were going from the river to the sea, and they asked, what river? And they couldn't answer the question. I mean, you couldn't be more stupid, if you ask me. If you're going to, you know, scream and yell and be stressed out about something, you should at least know what it is. And, you know, and if you do know what it is, then you should probably think about something else and you wouldn't be all stressed and upset. You know, it's like, you know, you can refine the ability to be happy, but you can refine the ability to be unhappy as well. And worrying and reliving bad memories is one of the best ways to go about that. And I like to get people to add up all the time they spend on whatever their problem is. And then I ask them, I go, so in the next, 40 years or 20 years, you're going to spend 10,000 hours doing this. And I always look at them and go, does that sound smart? And I have I've never had anybody look at me and go, yes, not one. 54 years and not one person has said yes.
Yeah, because it's a big no. I remember when I first started learning NLP that I loved the fact that there were tools onto how to do something instead of what to do. So many people always told me what to do, but then I didn't know how to do it. And that's why I didn't do it, not because I didn't want.
Yeah, lots of people will tell you to stop worrying, but they don't tell you how to do it. Lots of people tell you to get over your fear, but they don't tell you how to do it. And, the magic is all in the how. And your ability to change the way you think is what controls how you feel. There is an overlap between the cortexes in the brain, between the one that creates your feelings and the ones that create pictures in your mind and the thing that creates sound. These cortexes overlap about 40%, 30 to 40%, depending on the person. And they're all connected to the connection between your intestines, your hollow and solid organs, which is called your entemic nervous system. The entemic nervous system comes up through the old brain and is represented on the kinesthetic cortex. And otherwise you wouldn't know you were having feelings. And when those feelings are influenced, because there's an ambiguity in your brain neurologically between pictures and feelings and sounds and feelings. So if you're talking to yourself in a stressed voice, it's going to distort these things and you're going to have more stress. You have to learn how to talk to yourself and how to make pictures so that you become more productive as a human being, so that you can manifest in this world and have a more important purpose than worrying about the past and fretting over the future.
Absolutely. I have one.
Future, Ale, sorry. Speaking about the future, there are some interesting questions about the future of NLP. So someone is asking, is everything already discovered? What do you think
No.
of the future?
The answer to that is no.
Yeah.
And that's not just true about NLP, that's true about everything. Yes, we don't know everything. NLP has only been around as long as I have, and even less than that. I started this about 54 years ago. Astrology has a 20,000-year database. So they have a lot more information about astrology than we do about the human nervous system. And neurology was in its infancy when I started. There were no MRIs then, the best you had was an EEG, which is like a microphone over New York City. They're not very specific. Now we have functional MRIs. We can watch the brain changing. We have people with electron microscopes, going through and looking at brain matter. And I read everything neurologists do. Most of it is not applicable for me, but I read it all because every once in a while I find something wonderful. And these are dedicated, hardworking scientists trying to understand how the brain works. I not only want to know how it works, I want to know how to use it. And that's where NLP comes in. It's all about purpose. And there are purposes that haven't even arrived yet, just to start with. There are a lot of people who have problem with cell phones. When I started, there weren't any. We would never have expected that you could have a computer and a phone in your pocket. But like everything else, it changes over time. When I started out, telephones weighed enough you could kill somebody, and now you can't even dent them. It's a different time. And there's going to be new innovations in the world, and the universe is going to change. Eventually, we'll figure out how to get into outer space and do all kinds of wonderful things there. I imagine that will be long after I'm gone, but there will be neuro-linguistic programmers that will have to deal with things. Part of the reason I worked with people at NASA, I didn't work at NASA, but I did work with a lot of people at NASA, was because, space flight created problems in communication. You have to be very careful what you say when there are people in outer space. There was an example where the astronauts, something went wrong with the life support system. And, the guy on the radio said, there's something wrong with your life support system and there's nothing you can do about it. What he really meant to say is we're going to fix it from down here, but he didn't say that. And of course, their heart rates went wild and, they're thinking they're going to die. And he's thinking, that he said to them, sit back and relax. We're going to take care of it. But that's not what he said. You have to be very precise about what you say when people's lives are at stake. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Robbie, do you have any other question, or I go with the last one?
I think you can go with the last one. What do you
Okay,
think?
so we can leave Richard. Richard, actually, there is a word that I've learned from you in the last few years, which is a particular word. I don't know if it exists in English, but it makes sense when we are talking in our world. And this word is territorizing. And because in the seminar you're going to do at the end of May here in Italy, is going to be an advanced master practitioner, and you will start from there. Can you define for us?
Start with when I come there, this is a really nice seminar to do because it gives me a chance to teach and talk about things I don't normally get to. But the idea is of NLP is that you have a map which represents your understanding of the world. And some things are inside it and some things are not. When I wrote The Structure of Magic back in 1973, I laid out 3 universals of human modeling. In order to build a model in your head, to begin with, it has to be smaller than the world. And therefore, you have to distort it in some way. And once you've distorted it down, there are going to be some things you represent and some you haven't, and some that you make similar and some you keep separate. And we call this generalizing. And when I laid these 3 things out, I got tons of letters from people going, there was no documentation of where they came from. And where they came from was logic. I just made them up because I wanted to be able to describe the difference between what was represented in your map of the world and what was not. And when your understanding of the world doesn't include a lot of stuff, then sometimes it needs to, and we refer to this as building new territory, because the old adage from Korzybski is that the map is not the territory. Well, yeah, but sometimes you need to build new territory, and that's why I made up the word territorizing. And that some people, you go in and you adjust what's in their map so that it works better. And some people, you have to get them to represent new territory. So you have to give them a machine that represents what doesn't get represented by the machines in their mind. Because all of these little programs we talk about, motivation programs, decision strategies, learning strategies, if you don't have a good learning strategy for an instrument, you'll never play music. If you don't have a good strategy for art or 50 different strategies for art, you'll never create good things. And, this is true about everything. So sometimes you have to have a machine in your head that will build new territory in your map, because a lot of people generalize that because when they were young and they were abused, that they're always going to be abused. And that, a lot of times they're taught to believe that abuse means that they can never have intimate relationships with people and that they can never relax or they can never enjoy life because this happened to them. And that's just a fallacy of thinking. The fact that things happened in the past means that they happened in the past. Best thing about the past is that it's over. And you need to make it that way and then build new territory so that you can learn to appreciate and be grateful for what the universe has to offer, which is literally limitless.
Love it. I love it. And I love that the fact that this is going to be our starting point at the end of May, when you will come back to Italy to teach this advanced master practitioner of NLP. I love it so much. I hope everybody enjoyed tonight. Richard, thank you so much for
thank you for having me, and I'm sorry I disappeared for a while.
But you came
back.
back.
Apologize, but the computer beat me up.
But
And
you
then
came
when I
back.
did
You
get back,
won.
it wouldn't let me in, so I had to leave again and come back again.
We made it. We made it. I love it so much. I look forward to see you here in 1 month and a half, and I hope.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it. Italy is beautiful. It has great food, and the people are always lovely. And so I look forward to seeing you all there.
Yep. And for the newbies, let's start your voyage in NLP, because I think it's a great set of tools that will allow you to have a great quality of life. What do you think, Richard?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody, for being here for tonight. See you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.